The first winter Daniel Mercer spent alone on the mountain, he learned the language of silence. It wasn't empty the way people imagined. It breathed. It pressed against the cabin walls at night and whispered. Through the pine trees like something alive. He had chosen it that way after the divorce, after the courtroom lights and the careful, practiced voices that divided his life into before and after. Up here there were no opinions. Only wind, snow, and the steady crackle of firewood. That morning the sky was the pale gray of unspoken regret. Daniel stepped outside with his mug of black coffee. Steam curling into the cold air. The roof needed clearing. Snow had fallen heavy overnight, thick and wet, bowing the wooden beams. He pulled on his gloves, boots crunching against the frost-hardened ground. He rounded the side of the cabin and froze. At first his mind refused to understand what his eyes were seeing. A figure hung from the edge of his roof, suspended by a rope tied to the chimney. Blonde hair spilled downward like frozen sunlight. Bare feet brushed against the siding. The body swayed slightly in the wind. The coffee slipped from his hand and shattered on the rocks. No, he breathed, stumbling forward. He grabbed a ladder from behind the shed, hands shaking so violently he nearly dropped it. His breath came in ragged bursts as he climbed, heart hammering against his ribs like it wanted out. Up close he saw she was young, mid-20s maybe. Her skin was pale but not blue, not yet. Her eyes fluttered. "She's alive," he whispered. A surge of disbelief and terror crashing together inside him. He worked quickly, slicing the rope with his hunting knife while bracing her weight against his shoulder. They fell awkwardly onto the snow-covered roof, then slid down together in a clumsy tangle of limbs. He cushioned her head with his arm before they hit the ground. She coughed. The sound ripped through him with relief so sharp it almost hurt. "Hey," he said urgently, kneeling beside her. "Stay with me. You're okay. You're okay." Her eyelids fluttered again. Her lips were cracked, trembling. That was when he saw it. Across her bare shoulder, burned into the skin in angry, blistered letters, were the words "Apache lover." Rage surged through him, hot and immediate. This wasn't suicide. This was cruelty. "Who did this to you?" he asked softly. Her gaze found his. For a moment there was nothing but fear in them, wide and animal-like. Then she swallowed. They said you'd finish it," she whispered. Daniel's stomach dropped. "Who?" But she slipped back into unconsciousness. Inside the cabin, he wrapped her in blankets, built the fire higher, pressed warm cloths to her wrists. The letters on her shoulder looked recent, deliberate. His hands trembled as he cleaned the burns as gently as he could. He hadn't told anyone he was part Apache. It was a quiet truth, carried in old family stories in the shape of his grandmother's cheekbones. But this mountain town had its whispers, and not all of them were kind. An hour later, her eyes opened again. "You're safe," he said carefully. "My name's Daniel." She studied him as if measuring the truth of his words. "Claire," she replied hoarsely. "Claire," he repeated. "Do you know where you are?" She nodded faintly. "They drove me up. I thought they were joking." "Who?" She closed her eyes, tears leaking from the corners. "My boyfriend. His friends. They said it was just for fun. They'd been drinking. They found your place, said it would be poetic." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. "Poetic?" "They think it's funny," she whispered. "You know, the mountain man, the Indian." The word struck him harder than he expected. He hadn't heard it used like that in years. "They said if you found me, you'd either kill me or prove their point." "And what's their point?" "That people like you are dangerous." Silence settled between them, thick but not suffocating. Daniel sat back slowly, staring into the fire. He thought of the years he had tried to disappear into normalcy, of cutting his hair short, of avoiding stories about his grandfather, of laughing off the occasional slur because it was easier than fighting. Claire's breathing steadied. "I didn't think they'd actually do it," she said. "When they burned it," I screamed. They laughed. His hands curled into fists. "Why didn't you leave them before?" he asked gently. She gave a hollow laugh. "Loneliness makes you stupid." The words lingered in the air. Loneliness. He knew that word intimately. It had followed him up this mountain, sat beside him at night, slept in the empty half of his bed. It had convinced him that isolation was safer than rejection. He stood and crossed to the small wooden table where his phone lay. There was barely any signal, but sometimes enough. "I'm calling the sheriff," he said. Her eyes widened with panic. "They'll say I'm lying. They're connected. Their families." Daniel knelt in front of her. Again. "Then we'll make it impossible to ignore." He took photos of the burns, of the rope marks on her wrists. He documented everything with steady hands that no longer shook. As the day wore on, Claire spoke in fragments, names, places, details, each. Words seemed to pull her further from the terror of the morning and closer to something steadier. When the sheriff finally arrived, called in through a weak but persistent signal, Daniel stood tall beside her. He did not raise his voice. He did not let anger distort his words. He spoke clearly, deliberately. "Class is not about what you wear. It's about how you stand when hatred expects you to fall." That night, after statements were taken and promises of investigation made, Claire sat at his table wrapped in a thick sweater of his. The fire cast gold against her pale hair. "Why didn't you hate me?" she asked quietly. He looked at her, confused. "Why would I? For what they wrote. For being with them." He considered this. "Hate is easy," he said finally. "It's the cheapest thing we own. I've spent too many years buying it from other people." She studied him, something shifting in her gaze. "You're not what they said." "No," he replied softly. "I'm not." In the days that followed, Claire stayed while her injuries healed. The story spread. The arrest came quicker than expected. Evidence has a way of stripping arrogance bare. On her last morning there, she stood on the porch, the same place he had found her. The snow had melted, revealing dark earth beneath. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. Daniel shook his head. "You don't owe me." She hesitated. "You saved my life." He looked out at the mountains, their peaks catching the early light. "Maybe," he said, "but you reminded me of something too." "What's that?" "That being alone doesn't mean being silent." She stepped forward and hugged him, careful of her shoulder. It was brief but real. When her car disappeared down the winding road, Daniel remained on the porch. The mountain was still silent, but it no longer felt empty. It felt watchful, protective. He had been called many things in his life. Some whispered, some burned. But as the wind moved gently through the trees, he understood something simple and unshakable. True strength is not in the myths others create about you. It is in the choice to answer cruelty with dignity and fear with courage. And for the first time in years, Daniel Mercer did not feel lonely on his mountain.